You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. I'm Kevin Power. Welcome to the SaskScapes podcast. I hold in my hand the novel Extensions by Canadian author Myrna Dey. Long-listed for the Scotia Bank Giller Prize in 2011, Extensions won the first ever Reader's Choice Prize that year. I met up with Myrna at her home in Kamsack, Saskatchewan. Among the many family and friends to which Myrna thanks in her novel, the acknowledgement of her husband, Cedric, stands out. Quote, "For balancing my heart and art." And that is precisely how I would describe my time with Myrna, a balance of heart and art. There is nothing pretentious about her. She is a woman of many experiences and speaks openly in an unassuming manner. And I suppose that's why she is so very approachable. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, once again, I've made a new friend. This is Myrna Dey. I am in beautiful Kamsack, the garden city of Saskatchewan, and my guest is Myrna Dey. I've waited very anxiously to meet. We had a great long conversation on the phone, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be a pretty great person to meet. So thank you for taking time out of your day.
You're welcome.
We're sitting comfortably in a really lovely, warm living room. And I was given your name by a contact in Yorkton and said there's a great writer up in Kamsack that you should talk to. So I did a little bit of research on the internet, but we can't always believe everything we read on the internet. So I decided to get your story straight from you. So tell me, were you born in Saskatchewan?
No, I was born in Alberta.
Uh-huh.
I was born in Vulcan, Alberta,
Right.
which is in southern Alberta. And it was mainly because there wasn't a hospital in Milo, Alberta, which was even smaller,
Right.
where my father was working in the bank there.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so and then we lived, I think he was transferred to Toronto when I was 4, and then Portage la Prairie, and then back to Calgary, where I spent most of my growing up years.
Right, in Calgary.
Yeah, went to school and university, and then Edmonton. Between Edmonton and Calgary, I went to university.
What did you study in university?
I studied modern languages and ended up, I majored in, French and German, and I ended up doing better in German, and so I took my master's was in German. I got a scholarship to it was an exchange scholarship to Berlin, and so then I came back and did my master's in German.
Right, and had you thought maybe of being an interpreter, or?
I don't think I thought of, no. I don't think I made many plans.
Right.
I just let life unfold.
Right.
And have continued to do that. But actually, I went back to Germany. I went on this scholarship, and then I came back, and then I went to Berkeley for 2 years and studied more postgraduate work. Mm-hmm. And
all again in German?
Yes,
right.
Yeah. And then I had enough, so I went back and taught in Germany in a high school. I taught English in a high school.
All right.
But yeah, I guess I was fluent at the time, but I haven't used it. So
what was the decision to bring you back from teaching in Germany back to Canada again?
Well, again, the fact that I never really was a teacher. I didn't. I hadn't planned out my life. I went to Toronto, and I taught. Again, I taught in a high school, Harvard Collegiate.
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah.
It's a very interesting school.
Right.
But by then, I really had decided I didn't want to be a teacher. I wasn't. I liked studying better than teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a job at the Canadian magazine. It's now defunct. It was like the old Star Weekly.
Right.
It was right downtown in the Simpson Tower.
Right.
And I worked there for, I think, about a year in the copy department. I liked that. I liked the writing world.
Right.
And then I met my husband, and then we went to Guyana, where he's from.
Oh.
Yeah, and lived 6 years in Guyana.
Wow.
Yeah, and two of our daughters were born there. The first one was born in Toronto.
Well, working as a copyist, just going back to that, was that sort of the bug that started the writing?
I've always written.
Really?
Since before I could write, I would dictate to my father. And I wrote all through school. I had a scholarship to the Banff School of Fine Arts when I was in high school, grade 11.
Wow.
And then just the university courses took over the writing muse in a way. And then when I got back to Guyana, I started writing again.
Well, what then in your earliest years, what do you attribute your the writing bug? Yeah,
my mother was a writer.
Was she?
Yes, yeah, she was. And my mother was we were surrounded by books. I mean, I had to put earplugs in when I studied for my physics exam because she was always talking about the current book she was reading.
Right.
And my brother and I got a complete education living with her. It was just osmosis because she shared all that she was reading. And she was probably one of the most well-read people I've ever met up until now. She was she had an inquiring mind. And so I grew up in that. I grew up with books and writing and learning and just carried it on.
Did your mom write professionally?
Not professionally. She wrote stories and had them published. No, it was more personal essays. She did write 3 novels. One was published in serial form, but mainly, no, she didn't really make a name for herself, but she was always writing. I mean, she was always sitting at her typewriter.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did living in Guyana influence your writing?
Well, it gave me another culture to write about.
Sure.
Yeah. And it also got me started back writing because when there was no TV, so I read, and then I had time. I was no longer studying.
Right.
So then I went back to my writing.
How long were you there?
6 years.
6 years.
Uh-huh.
What impressed you most about that culture?
Oh gosh, I should have thought. There was so much. It was a third world country.
Yeah.
And they, I mean, the negatives were the beggars on the street, the dogs, but it was, I think the warmth of the people and the, just the interaction, the communications and my husband, I feel privileged to have lived the Guyanese part of Guyana because there were a lot of Canadians down there who lived in their on enclaves.
Right.
And I was included in all of that. In fact, we met Trudeau. He came down, and just being one of the few Canadians, we were invited to meet him. But it wasn't an artificial life, but I was glad to have lived the Guyanese life because I knew all his friends and all his relatives, and it's an eye opener. I guess just the different pace, and yet the ambition, as most people know, being an immigrant, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. That's their motto, and which he did.
Right. And
then giving our daughters that half. I mean, it's a whole new world that now they're part of.
Right. Did you see, when you came back, did you see living in Canada differently than before?
Well, the one thing I really saw differently was the supermarkets, the grocery stores, because when we were there, it was very restricted. They couldn't get foreign goods. They were having a foreign currency crisis, so there was no money to buy goods coming from away. So, well, there was no fresh milk. So, but to get evaporated milk, you'd wait for the boat to come in for the cartons of evaporated milk. Oatmeal might come every so often. If you'd hear butter was in town, everyone would make a beeline to get butter. So that there was always the open markets that would have the tropical fruits and vegetables and so on. But yeah, I'll never forget being able to go down the rows and seeing all these plentiful and everything you wanted. Now in Guyana, we went back 4 years ago, my husband and I, and you can get everything there now. But this happened to be a kind of a depressed time in the economy.
Right. So when did you start publishing your writing? And it was probably first in journals and in periodicals.
Well, yes, in periodicals. Yeah, actually, the first one was here in Kamsack in the Wascana Review. It was a short story about coming back from kind of autobiographical, living in a small town. So that was the beginning, and then most of what I've written have been personal essays. Right. And
they say write what you know.
Yes, yeah, like trying to feed kids who didn't like anything to eat. You know, that sort of. I guess some of them were humorous, and yeah.
So was your form of writing fiction based on experience, or was it completely your life?
No, the fiction was. Sometimes, well, that one was the Peonies and Bleeding Hearts. It was called. That was fiction and based on this experience. And then I had written another one about. Well, it was some friend my husband happened to know about an immigrant situation and so on. So, but I would say most of what I write is based on
fiction based on experience.
Yeah. But then a lot of it are personal essays that aren't fiction. They're non-fiction.
So at what point did your writing move to actual books?
I actually wrote a book in Guyana. It never saw the light of day. It's in a drawer somewhere. But that was everybody had maids. We had a maid and she was a nanny and a maid. Because you didn't have washing machines or you didn't have the conveniences of home. And I found her fascinating. Like she was an Amerindian girl and she'd come from sort of the jungles, and just listening to her talk and learning her wisdom and talking about her family, how they all slept in hammocks. And I found her absolutely fascinating. She had such a quiet magic touch too with her daughter. She was, her nanny. And she became one of the family. So I wrote a book about her, and that was.
Did she get to read it?
No, she didn't, because we moved up here,
right?
And it wasn't. But she did take typing lessons. She was quite ambitious, which was good. She wanted to improve herself. In fact, she took over my typewriter, and I couldn't get it to it because it was just one of those. It wasn't even an electric typewriter. It was an old Smith Corona. I think I encouraged her a little too much, because she would get all dressed up and sit with the fan and do her typing and But I guess I've just always been interested in people. Right. And who isn't? I mean, isn't that what we write about? There's nothing else to write about.
Right. Just before I forget, on the subject of typewriter, when you're writing now, what are you writing on computer?
I write longhand.
You do?
And then I put it, and I always did. Even down there, I would write, but when I wanted to transfer it, she had the typewriter. Right. Yeah. But I write longhand.
There's something about good old pen and paper.
There is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
It's probably the uncertainty. I mean, now you can change it, but for me, it's the comfort. I cross out. Writing is probably the most difficult thing I do. I have to wrench out sentences. I am not it is not an easy process for me, the writing. But because I'll start and then cross that out, But then once the wheels, the momentum comes, it's the most thrilling thing there is.
Sure.
I mean, really, but it's not easy for me to sit down and face the blank page.
Right. But would you say it's better? Would you advise someone better that you start not knowing where you want to go, versus never picking up the pen until you have a clear thought of where your story should go?
I wouldn't advise anybody on anything because I think, seriously, anything in life, but especially in writing, I think everyone has his or her own technique, and some of them won't sit. I thought I heard John Irving will not write a sentence until he's done all the research for a year. Somebody else doesn't use an outline at all. So I'm pretty much I have an idea what I'm going to write, but I certainly don't know which way. You want to be open to it taking. So you peel back the layers of the onion as you're... Exactly. Yeah. And that is about the biggest thrill there is. If in mid-sentence you think you're going one way and it goes another way and you think, wow, that's where it should have been. That's an incredibly honest way of writing because you're discovering in the moment, as if you are the reader of a piece already written, right? Yeah. So, but I think you have to have. You can't just sit down and wait for it to come either, because I lack discipline because it is so frightening, to write for me. Sure. But people say, oh, well, you have to wait for the inspiration. No, you don't. There's a lot of discipline in it.
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode. Well, this may be out of sequence, but I do know that one of the books you wrote was longlisted for the Scotia Bank Giller Prize. Yeah. So that's no slouch of an honor. That was an actual. I don't want to. It was a backdoor landing on the long list of the Giller Prize. I don't know. Did you know the Reader's Choice? That was the first and I think only year that the Giller people decided to run a contest open to the public. I remember that was 2011. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And it happened, my book Extensions happened to win that Reader's Choice. I mean, I was happy that that it won, of course, but they're the people that buy the books. Yes, yes. That's a very important point. It was all online. Like the votes came in. That's how they tallied the votes. Yeah. So I would get they'd put comments why they were voting for Extensions, and some of them would put, I don't read it all, but I loved Extensions, and I thought that the ordinary non-reader is voting for the lofty Giller Prize winner. You know? And then the next year they had it separate. They didn't put it on and then finally they've done away with it altogether. So, now, do you track the success of the book as that process went along, or does the phone ring one day? What does that look like? You mean once it's... When it gets voted, are you following? Yeah, I was able to follow it on the internet, because every vote that came in would be, and they put comments. And how'd that feel? Oh, it was exciting. It was very exciting, yes, yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, that's a tremendous honor. You had said earlier, well, real writers, but, I have tremendous admiration for writers. I'm a frustrated writer myself. Well, it's difficult. Well, you know how difficult it is. It is really hard. It's about as difficult. But you got it out. I've yet to get it. I've yet to get it out. I'm still staring at the blank page. It's hard, yes. Right. But it's and tell me a bit about what I confess I've not read Extension, so tell me a bit about the story, the history of that book.
Well, again, I drew on my life. It has two strands: a contemporary narrative and a historical narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And the contemporary, the heroine or the female protagonist is RCMP constable.
Mm-hmm.
As is my daughter. Well, now I have two daughters.
Oh.
They're both RCMP constables.
Oh, really?
So I had a trove of information from her, like her police situations, plus her expertise. And she's the modern heroine in BC. And the historical narrative is, again, about a grandmother I never knew. So she's tracking down, it's her great-grandmother through letters, and then I was able to fictionalize a life for my grandmother that I never knew, because she was, my father was born in the coal mines in Nanaimo. The town was called Extension, and of course the book is Extensions.
Right. Oh, right.
So I gave her a life. I feel she had a hard life. Like, my grandfather was a drinker, and she died in the influenza epidemic. And she died when my father was 11, so he never knew her. Nobody knew anything about her. And I felt, to pay homage to this woman, I want to give her a life.
Sure.
Save her life. So, so again, it is autobiographical, because with a daughter and a grandmother.
Your daughters must have felt very proud.
Yeah, they did feel proud.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it was exciting, yes.
And so post 2011, what's happened?
Not much.
Your writing?
No, not much. No, I was very lucky, though. Well, maybe 2012. I was invited to a lot of book clubs, and McDally Robinson, I had a reading there, and then just people a friend of a friend would invite me to come and be part of the discussion, and I met a lot of people. It was very, heartening. Exhilarating is really what it was, to meet all these people, and just on the basis of talking about the book. And yeah.
So, let's think of the small town Saskatchewan, where there aren't necessarily a plethora of artistic resources and inspiration, yet somebody out there wants to write, who is a bookish person in small town Saskatchewan. So where do you draw? How do you find your voice through writing when you don't have a lot of inspiration?
Well, I think Saskatchewan is full of writers who've come from small towns. Like Guy Vanderhaeghe came from Esterhazy, didn't he?
Yeah.
There's Cassie Stocks, who just won the Stephen Leacock's award.
Yeah.
She's from, is it Eston?
I think it's Eston.
Yeah, I think it's full of people. I think Saskatchewan, actually, there's something about falling back on your own resources. I think our climate, and because maybe the isolation, we almost have to make our own entertainment. If we want anything, or we go inward and write our own entertainment. I don't think it's a absence of inspiration. I think it's almost, it is an inspiration.
Right,
sometimes.
but you would say read. I mean,
of course I would say, yes, of course I would say read. Yes. Yeah, that's the number one thing. Yeah. Read is read all the time. Yeah.
Because I always find it alarming to ask, young singers who inspires them, what music inspires them, and the answer often is, I don't know. And I'd say, really? Because the only hope I had was listening nonstop, obsessively to music.
Yes.
And that's the one thing we always have. We have a fabulous library system throughout this province.
In Saskatchewan. Oh, we really do.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes. Just get a book.
Yes.
Reading.
By all means. That goes with that. I take for granted so much. I didn't even mention that.
Yeah.
But yes.
But I think sometimes that may be overlooked, and we're living in a culture of get the fast achiever.
Very. Yes.
Right. And so we forget that it's slow and steady wins the race.
Always.
You started by reading. Yeah. I mean, you became bookish, as they
Yes,
say.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, I grew up, as I said, I grew up in a bookish house, though.
right.
So
Right.
you didn't, as you said, you didn't have any of that, but I had that advantage too.
Well, no, I had it because of my parents.
Okay,
But
but your town,
outside of
I see
that,
what you mean.
nothing
Yeah,
in schools.
yeah.
Were it not for my parents,
Uh-huh.
were it not for their love of music and their love of reading, I don't know. I would have withered. I can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine finding it myself.
No, that's right.
And it's all. And there was one pivotal teacher. Did you have one pivotal teacher?
Yeah, I did. I had a creative writing teacher.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Who
did.
made
Yeah,
all the difference?
Yeah, but it was Calgary was a big city, so that's different. But yeah, I did have a creative writing teacher.
Yeah.
But I can't even imagine not having grown up in that in my family. Like
Right.
my mother subscribed to the New Yorkers when she was in Milo, in that little town.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet I guess I looked around at my friends and none of their mothers were like that. So
Right.
I did see the other side, but it
Yeah.
was just so natural
Yeah.
in our household for reading and writing.
Right.
Both.
Do you have other artistic outlets other than writing?
Knitting.
Knitting.
Yeah. And it can be artistic.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So you mentioned you're not writing now, but are you one of these people that you will never stop? When it's time for you to create, is there that burning drive that says I've got to get something out?
Yeah, well, it's what Gloria Steinem said at first. Writing is the only thing that I do that when I do it, I don't think I should be doing something else.
Right.
So that always in the back of my mind, no matter what I am doing, the call is to write.
Right.
Whether I'm doing it or not. But I actually am writing again. I am writing, but I don't. The discipline at times fails me because other things have, they come up.
Sure.
But no, I don't think I'll ever lose that.
I've talked to a lot of artists who are fantastic procrastinators, myself included.
Oh.
Do you find that it's in the race to a deadline when you should have that the best inspiration comes in those last?
Well, I don't know. I actually no. My other I have two RCMP daughters, and the other one's a journalist, and she has to write to deadline. Like she writes for a living. I couldn't do that. Like when I am even a little personal essay, I'll get a scrap of an idea. And I'll think I've got to develop that. And it'll be a month. Like I have to let it sort of steep in. Right. I can't write on command. Right. So
the opposite of that.
The opposite of that. Right. Yeah, I don't know. Well, if the whole thing is maybe nicely done and I just have to go through and I love rewriting. I absolutely love because it's not the blank page anymore.
Right. Did you say one of your daughters is a journalist?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
No, well, she's the only apple. It didn't fall far from the other two. Neither my husband nor I can get the cop.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's about as alien to both of us as we could have imagined.
Right. So you do continue to write now. Mm-hmm. Is there another book waiting to get outside of you? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done 100 pages of that already, but it's a continuation. It will have Arabella Drivensides, she's the RCMP protagonist.
Right.
She'll be it'll be two narratives again.
Right.
But of course, the grandmother's story is gone. This I want to work in my Guyana experience into this one. I think it would be a shame not to use it since it's so much a part of me.
Right. Is there anything about Saskatchewan that influences
I
your
wish I
writing?
The thing, sometimes I wonder, well, why isn't she in Saskatchewan? Because Saskatchewan has definitely influenced me. Yes.
Right, sure.
Yeah, I'm very loyal to Saskatchewan. I feel, again, I think it's the landscape that you turn. There aren't distractions. You really turn into yourself. Like this little town is very conducive to writing. Mm-hmm. If I could get over the procrastination. Right. But Are
there a lot of writers in Kamsack?
No, there aren't.
Do you have opportunity to do readings here? at all,
Well,
or are you
when my
asked
book
to?
was published, they were extremely supportive. The
Right.
whole town was so supportive. They would, well, one friend I think bought 15 copies. Well, it came out just before Christmas, so people were buying them as, excuse me, as Christmas gifts. The library had a signing, and the book club. There is a book club, and the book club had me there. So, no, the town could not have been more supportive.
You're their local hero.
Yeah, well, they're writer in residence, I guess. So,
Right.
yeah.
Is there a writer in residence program here at all?
Not here.
There's a
No.
library here, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there's a library.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's not a. I think only Saskatoon and Regina have one, don't they?
Saskatoon definitely has one. Regina definitely
Yeah.
has
Well,
one.
Gail Bowen is in
Right.
there, and she's
Yeah.
come here 3 times actually to speak in our library. So
Uh-huh.
she's a marvel of a woman.
That
and-
is, in fact, it was.
Oh.
I interviewed Jean Freeman in her studio. She wasn't there that day, so
Oh,
they donated a studio
Yeah.
space to record.
yeah. No, she's. I have no end of admiration for Gail Bowen. I think she's wonderful.
What writers inspire you, Canadian or otherwise?
Well, Alice Munro.
Yeah?
My mother discovered, as I said, my mother was kind of avant-garde because she had been reading Alice Munro since I think her first story. So I grew up knowing about Alice Munro, and I carry the torch. Zadie Smith, she's a writer in England. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I know that name.
Yeah. Ann Tyler.
Right.
Let's see who else. I'm just trying to think.
You mentioned John Irving.
Yeah, John Irving. I'm trying to think of some Canadian writers whom I just read the Cassie Stocks. She's New West Publishing too. I guess you feel part of the family when
New West Publishing published Extensions.
Yes, and
Right.
Cassie Stocks book.
Right. Jan Martel.
Uh-huh.
Have you had an opportunity to meet him?
Well, when I was I went up. I was at 2 Word on the Street.
Yes.
The one with Gian Gameshi, that at the Giller
Mhm.
tent, and then I was in the Saskatchewan one, and his wife was speaking before I was.
Right.
He was there in the
Yeah.
audience, and she's a wonderful speaker, and but that's the extent of
Yeah.
hearing him.
So there's always one writer that you grew up with that kind of
Yes,
got under your skin.
yes.
Can you recall one
Well,
that you grew up with?
the ones I've mentioned that I have read every single look, it would be Alice Munro and Ann
Right.
Tyler.
Right. What is it about Alice Munro's work that touches you?
I just find her language. It starts out. Well, they say ordinary, which it's not ordinary, but it's and it's not simple. But then she packs such an unexpected punch in her story. It'll be about common folk, I guess, and but then all of a sudden it's this language that takes you just around the corner, and you're not expected to where she's going. And then she gathers everything she's put in. She puts in different threads. She takes liberties, I think, with time.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll be giving you a block about somebody, and then it might be 30 years later. But then at the end, everything ties up so neatly in such beautiful little it's short. At the end, it's
Mm-hmm.
these sentences, and it's just breathtaking for me.
Right.
Yeah, and yet, but it's not like esoteric.
Right.
It's easy to understand.
Right.
Her language.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Is reading escapism for you? I mean,
It's I wouldn't say a duty. It's necessary for me.
Okay.
Yeah, reading is if I don't read, I get restless and frustrated.
Right.
I need to be reading.
You won't stop writing it.
No, I don't think I will stop writing. I mean, as I said, I'll probably continue procrastinating, but
Right.
it is always in the back of my mind as the thing that. I don't know if you can call it a passion if you do procrastinate, but I think it is my foremost passion, I
Right.
suppose.
are you informed by everything around you? Are sort of, do you see the world very, you perceive, are you constantly absorbing
Yes.
everything?
Yeah, I am.
Is it always feeding in some small, subtle way
Yes.
that which you'll
I would
ultimately
say
write
so.
about?
Yeah, because I think I'm analytical. I think I'd like to know what's going on. Maybe I'm just nosy. Well, I'm curious.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I
Do you need to be curious to be a
Yes.
writer?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is, I've always said that was the greatest gift my mother ever gave me, was curiosity. Yeah, because she was interested in everything, and it all filtered down to us, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah.
You can never be, I think if you're curious, well, I mean, you can be a busybody, I guess, but you're never really lonely if you're curious, because there's always so much to partake of in the world, you know?
What a great way of looking at that.
Yeah, well,
Well, that's you're never lonely when you're curious.
well, that's the way I feel.
Yeah.
That I mean, certainly with books it help, but anything that captures your interest, don't you think that's you're not lonely?
And curiosity and taking everything in gives you a vocabulary with which to express how something makes you feel. You look at this young generation now, and it is the neutrality of reaction to everything that I find so alarming.
I know.
And then when you meet someone that's completely polar opposite to that, it's such a breath of fresh air, and you have such tremendous admiration that they're moving through their world around their peers.
I know.
Very, very differently.
I know.
With tremendous courage.
And there are people like that.
There
I mean, that's the
absolutely
beauty of life, is that those people are out there.
Yeah.
And they will eventually get hurt. I mean, the majority, well, it rises to the top. I believe that the quality rises to the top.
And hopefully they become, that way of living becomes infectious for other, that there are other peers, that it inspires others to that of the same age category. That everybody's stuck in texting mode.
Well, I know.
Brevity is key.
Yes.
I remember what I was going to ask you earlier. What do you have to say on the topic of editors? Are editors your friend?
Would I invite, especially somebody who knows more, who's in the business, because I write in isolation. I don't have even any professionally writing. I have friends who are good readers and intelligent people, but I don't have any sort of expertise, friends with editing expertise. So I would consider them friends.
Right.
I'd like to have help.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there some writers that find it very hard to let go when an editor says this?
Probably, I would guess. But that's one of the, I've read a lot on writing, and one of the things they say you have to do, you just absolutely have to be prepared to let go of your favorite words. Yeah.
Right.
Because, and it is hard.
Right.
Yeah.
What time of day is easiest for you to write when you do write? Does it vary?
Probably more, like not too early, but probably around 10. And then if I can stay with it till, mid-afternoon. I don't like to write in the evening.
Right.
And I don't get up. See, Gail Bowen gets up at 4:30. That's why she's so successful. Yeah.
Really? Do you have to get up early and write to be successful?
Well, no, but I do think people get up earlier, pack more into a day.
Sure. Well, early to bed.
And I don't. It's not my rhythm, and I'm not changing now.
Right.
But you have to be disciplined. Right. Sure. I
mean, when the book gets set free, when Extensions is first set free out into the great wash of the public, do you feel like you're letting go of a part of you? Is it like,
well, and I want to redo a lot of parts. Excuse me, a lot of parts.
Oh, really? You go, I wish if I could do it all over. Oh, yes, so you're constantly you're constantly self-critiquing on what you're doing. Right.
And actually, I was quite encouraged or amused to hear Alice Munro was the worst about that. I heard her on Peter Zosky once, and she was doing a reading. He says, well, that's out of her book, her published book. And she said, he said, that's not what it says. And she says, I know, I'm rewriting it while I'm reading it. And I've read Douglas Gibson's, he was her publisher, McClellan and Stewart. And he said that one of her books, it was at the printers, and she wanted to change it from the first person to the third person. And it was that far advanced. And that's a big change to change the voice.
No kidding.
Yes. And he said, well, they let her do it, but he said, I let her pay the penalty price of the printer just to, make a point. So I thought, okay, I'm not the only one who wants to.
But in a way, I don't think that's such a bad thing, because I think it's the death of the artist when they get to the end of a work and say, that's exactly what I want to achieve. I think it's the constant self-critic that keeps us moving forward, don't you?
Well, yeah, and yet I kind of envy that. I wish I could be a little more, because I'll change things so often that eventually I come back to the first one and think, okay, the first sentence and have to. Yeah, but I do like rewriting.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of important to always have a sense of unrest about
well, I hope so.
work. Yeah, I think it's the motivating factor to pick up the pen again and keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll keep going.
I will.
And we'll keep reading.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope this one finds a publisher. That was its maiden voyage. I was very lucky with extensions.
Right.
That New West took it, but you never know. I mean, it's a gamble.
Sure.
Every book you write.
The arts is a gamble.
The arts is a huge gamble.
It's a huge gamble.
Theater, painting. Yeah. Oh, yes.
But for those of us who are playing, we wouldn't want to gamble any other way.
No.
You have to. It's in your blood.
That's exactly right. Gloria Steinem had it right.
Yeah. Then I look forward to seeing more of your work on the bookshelf.
Well, I hope so, Kevin. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Paul. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created by Kevin Power as part of the Culture Days Animateur program operated by Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sports, Culture and Recreation. If you want to hear more of these podcasts, or to see the great work being done by other Sask Culture animateurs, please visit www.iheartculture.ca. Special thanks to Paved Arts in Saskatoon for their technical support. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There is no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time,